Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jason with Eduphoria. I also have Jenny with me and Joel and Paige as well. Glad to have you guys with us. We've had some experience a little bit with some people coming in, and when we go out training, sometimes we observe things that we want to address from a best practice standpoint. And one thing that we see, and we've seen a little bit pretty often in the last couple months, is test type management becoming overwhelming, especially for our districts that have been customers for a long time. If you've been using Aware for many years, sometimes things can get out of hand, and it makes things difficult for looking around and finding things. And we want especially our end users like teachers or principals or whatever, to have the at least as much ease as possible to find the things they're looking for. Let's kind of, by the way, Jenny and I will be doing the presenting part, even though Paige and Joel are on in the background and be helping with some questions. As always, if you do have questions that are topic related, so in this case, we'll be talking about Aware test type management. So please try to keep your questions related to that topic. And if you do have questions, obviously, just like always in our webinars, post them into the questions box there as part of the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar box, and we'll try to address them as we can. If your question doesn't get addressed, maybe if you do have something off topic or whatever that you need, then obviously you can always contact our support team at support@eduphoria.net, or if it's a training issue, you could email training@eduphoria.net. Also, just as always, this webinar is being recorded. And that recording will be emailed to all the registrants, just like always, and also we'll have it posted in our online help. All right, so the first thing is, like any first step, you want to admit that you have an issue. And so one example of what you might see if we think, and once again, this is not saying that anybody is wrong. We don't want to take anything back that way. It's just, what's the best practice, really thinking about the end user. And so if you have a whole lot of local test types on your Analyze tab, as you can see here in this shot here, there will be a lot of these little pencils before you even get to star test or anything like that. All of those beginning pencils are your local test types. And so if you log into your Aware and you click on your Analyze tab from the district standpoint, and you see a whole bunch of test types similar to this, and you hear from people from time to time that say, you know what, it's hard for us to find things, or if it's just something we want to clean up, just because there's a lot of old stuff in there. I mean, some of you guys have been customers of ours for going on close to 10 years or more. And so you may have some local tests that you created back in, I don't know, 2007 or something, back in there, 2008, 2009. And, although that data, we don't want to delete it, you do want it in there because you have a student history connected to it. But you don't look at it very often. And so we may want to consolidate those into something that is old and out of the way, so that it becomes more clear, to find out the more pertinent, more current information. And so that's the other end of the spectrum of what we would tell you. You probably have too many. A lot of times people would create test types for each campus or each year or whatever, and Jenny's going to talk you through how that's not really necessary. But on the other end of the spectrum is some of you out there may not even have more than one test type. The default when you first start using Aware, I'm kind of going to drag over here, when you first start using Aware as an Aware district, when you go to the Assessments tab to create a new test, or if you click on Configure Test Types, there's one that's called Local Test. Like that's the default in my demo site here. I don't have one, but if you're a district and you go to Configure Test Types and you're a data administrator, and the only local test type you see is called Local Tests, then you might be on the other end of the spectrum, and you might want to create some to help organize. There's always a balance between having too many or too few. Definitely one is probably too few, because most likely you're doing different kinds of tests, maybe district tests and campus tests, or even some benchmarks versus common assessments or CBAs. And so we're kind of also going to address just right now, just verbally, that if you never knew that you could even add test types, you're kind of on the other end of the spectrum. And so this webinar not only would be to clean up those that that are too many and merge them or consolidate them into one or fewer. But it could be also, we've been creating tests all forever in something called local test, and now we need to, let's move those around and kind of organize those into more categories to make it more beneficial for the district. And so, if you're on one side or the other, and you find that out through this webinar, you do some investigation, and you look, and you're like, we may need to clean up one way or the other, or add some one way or the other, and we want to hear, what the experts here at Eduphoria think is the best way for us to do it. Obviously, reach out to us individually. You can email training@eduphoria.net, and we'll be glad to look at what you got, talk you through what we think is the best practice and typical. Obviously, there's not an answer that works for everybody. Different size district, different types of tests. There's not one answer fits all, but we could definitely get you in the right direction to help you get your stuff cleaned up. Or in this case, if you need to add more categories to organize, we'd be glad to do that as well. A question's already come in that says, can test types be merged? And absolutely, that's kind of the way we're going to talk you through fixing things up in a little bit. And that's it's going to be easy. And Jenny will show you that in just a minute. So although, we're kind of in Texas going to skip spring a lot of times, we go directly from winter to summer. Obviously we call this one spring cleaning. And sometimes we don't know that we need to clean things up because we don't know that there's any other way. And so that's absolutely what we discover when we're talking to people from time to time. And so this webinar is just something that, once again, take it as a recommendation. Take the information, hopefully, as a learning opportunity. And if you need anything else, let us know. All right, I'm going to switch over to Jenny, and then Jenny's going to take over.
Okay, great. So I'm so excited about doing this webinar because this is one of the things I love to help districts do. I like to organize closets and organize and make sure things are filed correctly and in the appropriate spot and cleaned out. And so this is one of my things in Aware that I just really like to do. And there are districts that I notice that do an excellent job of it, and the districts on the other side of the spectrum that really need some help with it. And one of the things that happens as a trainer is, and in Tier 1, a lot of times a new administrator starts in a district, and they realize that Aware doesn't look like it did in their old district. And they say, why, the question is, why are there so many green pencils, which is what Jason showed you earlier. All the green pencils in the Analyze tab makes it difficult to find assessments. And the other place that people struggle when they have too many test types or too few test types is when they're building an assessment. And so if you're building a campus level or district level assessment and you have to assign that to a test type, and you click on that list, in the wizard to add it to that test type, and there are, 30 options, it's really hard to know where it goes. And what we see very often is what Jason mentioned earlier, is that districts create or recreate the test type for every year or for every campus, and neither one is necessary. When you create any test type in Eduphoria, and then it goes and data is added to that, or even under the assessments tab, it's already filed by test type. And then within, and you can see in my demo, I went in this morning and I created some by year just to kind of give me something to clean up. But normally you would just see benchmarks, CBAs, unit checks, and common assessments, 4 test types. That's all that district used. That's all they needed. And I'll tell you, our demos are built off a fairly large size district. And so when I go in here, I shouldn't see these by year, because when I click on those, it's already organized by year. So it's like I've taken and created a whole new file cabinet and never finished filling up the file cabinet, the files in the file cabinet from the first file cabinet. So I'm not allowing the system to file the files appropriately when I'm moving them to a new file cabinet each year. And so when I click on the year, then it goes to grade level. And if I was if these were organized by campus or in a campus level, I would see my campuses listed to choose my assessments or to choose my data. And so I don't have to recreate these test types for each year or for each campus. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions. And the other thing we see is just that you use a certain type of assessment for a number of years, and then curriculum decided to rename that type of assessment to something else. And we've never reconciled the two or even just hidden the two. A good example is not one we're creating locally, but when you can still view your tax scores. That isn't always necessary for everybody in the district to be able to view tax scores from 2014 is the last year this district that our demos are made out of administered a tax test. And so you can do some things just by like hiding test types that you're not using anymore. And then we're also going to look at how we manage and merge test types. So all of this is done under the assessments tab. And if I go here to configure test types, again, this morning I went in and I created some duplicate test types by year, so I'd have something to clean up in the webinar. But I can go through and look at these and I say, okay, I don't want to have a test type by year anymore. I only want to have benchmarks, CBAs, unit assessments, and common assessments. So I'm going to have to go in and as someone asked earlier, how do you merge those? And there's kind of a process for it's not truly just I can say I want unit checks to now become this. I have to actually go into mass edit assessment and move them from one test type to another. So we'll look at how to do that. But another thing that I might want to do is I'm going to just add a test type called retired assessments or old assessments, something like that. And so and this is how it works too, guys. If you are one of those districts that only has, local assessments and you want to start adding test types, this is how you would do it. I'm going to click this add a test type option, and I'm going to call them retired assessments. So I'm not going to delete them. I'm just going to move old tests into retired assessments, and then I'm only going to make retired assessments visible at the district level, so that if for some reason somebody wants access to a test created in 2013-14, the test is still in the system, but it's filed under a different type. So I'm not getting rid of it. I'm not losing the assessment itself. I'm just kind of cleaning up the view or making it easier to find tests for other users, for end users.
And Jenny, let me jump in right there. What she's kind of saying, guys, and on those view options, just to clarify, that allow teachers to view the test. The teachers just specifically have their own, and that that's on the Teacher Analyze tab, and then you see in the third one down summarization on the Analyze tab. So when I showed that screenshot at the beginning with all those green pencils at the top, if you take off the checkbox that says enable summarization on the Analyze tab, that would be removed. But yes, that would kind of solve your problem of getting it off the Analyze tab. But we still do recommend that you consolidate test types and don't have 37 in there, that you just uncheck that button, because when you go to create a test, if you'll remember through the wizard, you have to click which kind of test type. And so that's another place that this becomes a problem, is that drop down has all 27 test types, and end users have a problem of picking ones we don't want them to pick if you leave them in there and don't consolidate them and get rid of them. And so if you did click that checkbox off that said enable summarization on the Analyze tab, and then somebody went in and built a test that because that test type was still available, they would never see their own data that they just built, and so you'd be creating a bigger problem. And so yes, you want to uncheck those so that we don't show that data, but that doesn't solve the problem of getting rid of test types. And so Jeannie's going to continue and show you that when we get into mass editing here in a minute. But you might have just thought off the top of your head, well, why can't I just uncheck those buttons, and then it solves the problem for me? Why do I need to go move everything and consolidate? It's because if you don't, then those tests can still be created in that test type, and if the data is hidden, then people are going to be they're going to be thinking where is broken because they're going to be giving a test, and then they're going to go to the Analyze tab to look for it, and it's not going to be there. It's because you've told it not to be there.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I've created this retired assessments test type. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start moving tests like from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014 into retired tests. So again, if I need to access it, I can, but I don't have to look at it every time I go to the Analyze tab. And so where I'm going to do that is under Mass Edit Assessments. And I am just going to go up here and I'm going to search by year. Let's look and see if we have anything from, nope, nothing all the way back then. Let's start with 2011, 12. And even if they're archived, I'm not sure when our demo tests start. Looks like we're going to have some there. So we're going to move these 2013, 14 assessments over. Even if they're archived, I'm still going to move them into retired tests because that's kind of two different things. And we're going to talk about archiving here in a second. And so all of these tests that were built like in 13, 14 are going to go into retired tests. You know, it's going to vary by district how often you want to move tests into retired tests. You know, if you want to keep 2 or 3 years of tests visible, that's great. You know, if you want to go further back, it's fine. It's every district is going to have a different opinion about how many years they want visible on the Analyze tab. But you know, you can just go back, move them to retired test, or leave them, or you could leave all those years active. You know, you can, you know, I look at some districts and all the way back to like, you know, 2009, 2010, they still have those active on the Analyze tab. It's really just up to you. We just want you to know this is an option. So if I look here, I have 590 tests available. Now, in the Mass Test Editor, you can edit about 130.
Hey, Jenny, hold on 1 second. There's a very pertinent question that I knew was going to come up, and I'm prepared for it. So I'm going to take over right quick, and we'll switch back to Jenny. Sorry, guys, but I knew this was going to come up, and it just came up, and so I want to go ahead and show it because it's very pertinent right quick. And so I'm going to show my screen right quick. All right, so as Jenny said, so back in unchecking these boxes, and so these test types, if you have a test type that has been used for campus and or district level testing, so those of you that have been customers of ours for a while, back in the day, before there were team tests, there were only essentially teacher tests and then non-teacher tests, which were either campus or district. And so there really wasn't any determination between a campus and district level test other than the person that created it. There wasn't really two different levels. The levels were automatically created by your role. Well, with the invention and the addition of team testing, that became different because now we separated those test levels so that you could specifically say this test type can only be used for campus, or this test type can only be used for district. And so if you've been historically using Aware, some of those tests that you think are district, like once again, whoever picks the test type kind of determines that if it's available. But if it was created as a campus and you now want to limit it to only district because we don't want people using that test type, like Jenny said, so if I try to uncheck this, so if I do that and you get a warning like this, what essentially that says is there have been tests in the past that have been given with this test type name, so called unit checks, that were at the campus level or at the team level. And so in order for you to make this test type only district level, you either have to move those tests from this test type into another test type, which is basically what Jenny is showing right now that I'm about that I interrupted. You can either move them in the Mass Test Editor, or you can cancel this action, obviously, or this is kind of the back end way to the Mass Editor as well, or you can move them to a different test type right here, a different level. And so if you do get this warning, it's essentially, it's not a bad thing. It's just telling you right now you've chosen from now on to say that this test type can no longer be used for people at the campus level. When they go build a campus test, it's not going to be in the drop down for them to choose, which is what you want. You don't want them to be choosing the test type that you want to be inactive or retired, like Jenny was talking about. And so you absolutely want that. And so if you get this warning, it's expected. It's just telling you in the past, a test was created there that was at the campus level. You need to move those tests before it will allow you to make this district only. All right, hopefully that cleared up any other questions, and I'm moving back to Jenny. Sorry, Jenny.
Okay. No problem. Okay, so when I look at this, I've got 590. I can only mass edit about 133, I think is like kind of the magic number assessments at a time. So I filtered by year. The next thing I'm going to probably do is try grade level. And that gets me down to 43. I'm going to select them. I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to move all of these tests into retired assessments. Okay. So I can keep doing that by grade level or by subject, whichever works best for you, or whichever the fastest way around. But again, I can move about 133 at a time. So again, I'm going to select them. I'm going to go to right here, advanced, modify, and I'm going to move all of these into retired assessments. Okay, so in this respect, I'm just filtering by year because I want to make sure all of these old tests are moved into retired assessments. So then once I finish 2013-14, I go to 14-15 and kind of do the same thing. So there's no true like merge. You can't just click and say, I want all of these tests to become these tests. You still have to use the mass edit tool, but that is how you're going to move them from one test type to another. So the next thing I'm going to kind of look at is the test types themselves. So I've got, these designated by year. If I'm going through here and I see, if I click on this like this, I don't want to use this test type. Someone created it and it was never really used. I can tell that the test type is empty because it has a delete option. If there are assessments tied to that test type, you cannot delete the test type. And so right here, I could go ahead and just click this delete and get rid of that test type. Okay, so any of these that have assessments in them, I'm going to have to move to the test type that I want them to go in. So again, I'm going to go to the mass edit assessments, and I'm going to look at those CBAs 2016-17, see what's there. Is that the one I just deleted? Go back. So I know there's CBA 16-17. Don't you love it when you're doing a training and things aren't working? Jason, do you have any suggestions here?
You probably just don't have any. There's a test type. There just probably aren't any tests in it.
There are. Yeah, I have assessments in there. CBA 17-18. Let me try a different one.
It's probably just because you created them today.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe so. I moved assessments in there this morning. Okay, yeah, they're still in my unit checks. Okay, so let's use unit checks as the example. I wanted to move my unit checks. I don't want to have a unit checks by year. I just want to have unit checks. So I have a couple of options. Let me go in here under the test types, and I'm just going to take one of these unit checks. And all I'm going to do, maybe my most recent year, I'm just going to take the year out of the title. So I just now have unit checks. Okay. Then under my mass edit assessments, let's Let's take one that's,
I hate to laugh, Jenny, but this is a little entertaining.
it is. Well, because it's really not working the way it's supposed to work. It's fun. Good times. Good times. So you should be able to search by test type. I'm not sure why. We'll have to check into
Well,
why
I
that's not
think
working.
it's just because none of them have been given in there, and you were tweaking it. So
Yeah, probably, probably. So all of these unit checks, um, you know what? I think it's because I did it this, so I think you're right. Because all of these, I moved everything out of just regular. I don't have a unit checks test type. I think after tonight, it probably would all be the way I fixed it this morning.
and our demo sites aren't live, and so it could be calendar related. It could, I mean, there's
It could be, yes, yes, that's true. Okay, so let's just pretend it's all working the way it should. I'm going to take all of these assessments that were 2016, 17 unit checks or whatever, and I'm going to, again, I can do about 133 at a time. I'm going to filter down maybe by subject this time. How many of these 480 are math? I've still got 187, so let's pull out grade 5. And we are going to select those, modify, and I'm just going to move them into the unit checks. So any test that was previously in unit checks 16, 17, unit checks 14, 15, unit checks 15, 16, any of those with the year, I'm just going to move those into unit checks. Okay, and I would do the same thing for CBAs or benchmarks. So again, I'm just going to edit one of those test types and remove the year, and then move all the remaining test types that have a year into the one without a year. Is that clear for everybody? Do we have any questions,
yeah,
Jason?
Jenny, if you would right quick go back and open your mass editor, I want to mention one thing, just kind of
Okay.
indirectly. I know you're probably going to talk about archive, but you can also search in here by test state. And when I say test state, it's either pending, active, and archive. And so if you want to do active, and then every test that's labeled active will come in here. So that's and I know Jenny was probably going to mention active, but we had a question come in about
Okay.
archive. Does it have to be archived? No, but that's
No.
absolutely that's absolutely a good way to narrow things down, right? If I've got tests from in the past, and maybe that's one of the ways I can narrow it down. You may not want to maybe hide something that's still active, even though it might have been created a couple years ago, because who knows, maybe somebody's using it for copying or whatever. That's way. So you can still search by test state in there as well. So you can type in active or pending or archive.
Right. Right, for sure. And so that is kind of my second recommendation. Once you have your test organized the way you want them, so you've moved them all out of the year categories or the campus categories for that test type and just put them in a sort of umbrella test type, I would go through and look for any old active assessments. So when I go in our demo and I search for active assessments, we still have, active assessments from 2013. Obviously, we want to archive those assessments. If you're keeping up with the archive process at the end of every year, it's really fast. If you have not archived for 5 or 6 years, it takes a little bit of time to do this. And so like in this case, again, I would start with active, and then I'm going to go active for math. And I've got to get down to, like I said, about 133 assessments before I can archive. So we're down to 26. And then one thing you may see is, so I'm just going to click this archive. You may get this, if you get this, are you sure? And yes, archive it, you're golden. The other thing you may get is an error that says some of the tests end after the date. And you will find in every district this happens, that somebody's created tests and they created them in 2015 and they set an end date of 2020 because they thought they were going to use that test for 5 years, I guess. I'm not sure why they do that, but they have the end date that is beyond today's date. And so when that happens, you have to kind of scroll through and find the assessment that's happening with. And under this, I could say select this one if this was the problem. Under modify, I'm going to set the end date to like yesterday or today, and then I'll be able to archive it. So if you get that error message, that's what's going on. But you do have to just kind of scroll through and find it. And sometimes there's more than one. You find one, you try it again, you still have one out there that's got an end date way pending. And so kind of watch for that. Also, under the math archive thing, I just like to say this is a little bit off topic, but when I'm seeing that issue with merged data, we know why it's happened, but this is a way to go in and verify it. You know, the test was created in this year and then it's been administered again this year. And let's say I only have 700 fifth graders. If it's been administered to 1,400 fifth graders or 1,450 fifth graders, we know the same test has been administered 2 years in a row instead of copying it into a new one. So that's kind of another place to go and just kind of confirm that that's happened. So, okay, so my goal would be, and I apologize, I had this all laid out. I thought it was just going to be perfect. By the end, I would just have just my unit, just my, my 4 test types I wanted. But because I was lazy and didn't set this up before this morning, it looks like it's going to have to go through like but again, it could be related to calendar dates or something in a demo site. But normally when you finish doing this, you would have all of just your 4 test types, and all of these that contain a year would be, married with those. So you're usually going to have a retired test type and then 3 or 4.
So I can tell you why. I can tell you why. I've done some research in the background. I can tell you why it's not working. So essentially now you cannot delete a test anymore. It's the button on the assessment is actually called remove. And so if you remove a test and you did not like move it prior to removing it, then it's still showing up under that test type as an active test, because we no longer allow people to essentially delete things anymore from a test, because in the past, we had people deleting tests by accident and we were having to restore them. And so, and obviously in our demo site, we've deleted and removed and whatever, because we play around and build stuff accidentally all the time. And I'm just playing around and training and whatever. And so we've removed tests. And if you've removed a test, this is kind of I wouldn't call it a bug because it's working the way it's supposed to be. But if you find that this happens to you, it's because you've probably removed a test on that test type, and so therefore it's not showing that you have any test types, but it really is in the background in the database. And so you can contact us and we can get in the background in the database and do some of that moving. Hopefully, this is something that we can prevent from happening now that I just discovered that it's happening.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's what's going on in this case, but yes, that does happen. That does happen. So in the process of cleaning up with districts, I've seen that where there's a test still tied to it that you can't see it, and we have to remove it out of the database because it's been deleted before it was, moved into the correct test type.
Well, but yeah, or even the remove button. Right. So it's either in the past. In the past, if you deleted it when you could delete it, that wouldn't be the case. It's if you've removed it now, which is really not a deleted, you can't see the test anymore, but it's really still there. Anyway, there's one other question I might as well answer while I'm interrupting here. It was do we recommend that school level test or campus level test and district level test be merged together? And I really stay away from that recommend. I will tell you that I don't have a problem with districts combining those, especially if they're into a retired or whatever. But maybe, if you want to be safe and make sure that there's still some differentiation between those, if you wanted to create like a retired district test and retired campus test, just so that you keep them separate, but you're consolidating them into one or two. Maybe that's the way to keep them separated. And then obviously on those check boxes, once again, on how the data is revealed, then you could just uncheck those check boxes unless somebody asks, hey, we used to have tests in there from 2013 and I was looking for it. And so that might be the best way to do it is have one of each, and then you could always go back and turn those things on. And you can always leave take it off the Analyze tab, take it off the teachers. You could always leave it on the Tests and Scores tab too, because sometimes, especially what we see the most of what people are looking at really a deep history of is if I'm looking at a particular student and I want to see their complete test history, you can leave it on the Tests and Scores tab for the student profile, but then take it off the Analyze tab and take it off for teachers. that kind of cleans things up on the Analyze tab. And so there's, once again,
Right.
there's a lot of fluctuation, and there's not really a one size fits all for each district. But if you do have questions, or are just wondering what would this do, what would this look like, please reach out. We can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I mean, that's kind of it. My recommendations for it. And again, like Jason said, the best way to kind of get this cleaned up, if you have too many green pencils, that's, your first clue that things need to be fixed. If you've got, more than 8 or 9 green pencils for sure, um, reach out to training@edgeauthority.net, and I'm happy to walk you through recommendations on how to clean up. It's really an easy process once you get started. It can take a little time, like I said, if things are a big mess and it hasn't been managed for several years, but it's not difficult. It's just a little time consuming.
It's like
But
that
once
drawer. It's like that drawer in your kitchen right now that has
yeah,
like four
yeah,
thousand pens and pencils in it, and and there's no sharpened pencils when your daughter needs to do homework.
yeah.
I deal with that. So.
Yeah, but once it's done and once you get in the habit of managing it kind of every year and moving, 1 year into retired test and evaluating with, because a lot of times the person who is managing Edufor isn't the person who would be the decision maker on what test types you need in a district. And so having that communication with, your curriculum team or campus leadership on what test types do you want to have, if you're having those conversations in the spring, it's easy to kind of rip that band-aid off in the summer, and that's why we're doing this right now, because you need to know going into the summer, what test types you need. Move everything, reorganize it, and when they come back, it's clean and ready to go. It's easier to do it then than to do it in the middle of the year, or even do it after the first of the year when people kind of have an assessment plan or assessment process in place. So that's kind of why we're talking about this now. And I think we'll do this again, this webinar again in the fall, early fall. Jason and I kind of talked about that earlier. But now is really the time to kind of have the conversation about what you need what test types you need, and then, come in during the summer and clean everything up. If you start moving things now, people will kind of probably freak out, but
Probably so, and we
yeah.
will, just like we do every year. We are going to have our end of year kind of clean up stuff and webinars, and we'll probably, in the aware only one, probably kind of re-mention this a little bit. Obviously, we won't go into the depth. It'll just be something that we say this is probably something you should clean up, and obviously there'll be more topics in that as well. And obviously we'll be going over archiving tests. But also on our other applications, we'll be doing an end of year like we always do, and then probably going through the summer, we'll do some, getting ready for the following year, next year, and set up and stuff like that. So this is, we just picked this to do because we've had some particular examples in the last several months that this has come up, and so we thought it might be a good idea just to specifically talk about test type management and cleanup. But obviously, it does not replace or interfere with our normal end of year stuff that we always have, that we, as you see on our upcoming webinars, already have scheduled. And so make sure you register for those, along with any of the other webinars coming up that you would like. And we're going to start doing more webinars like this, hopefully. If you guys have any questions, or if you have any suggestions on something that you might have done, we could absolutely do a webinar with you, and you can present some of your ideas. That'd be something great for us, and also for each of you to kind of share with each other. Always good ideas out there that sometimes we don't know about, and so if you have them, let us know, and then we could put something so that you could share with the world and help everybody out. Jenny, I think, are we good?
Yep, we're all good. We're all
okay,
good.
Unless you have additional questions, go ahead and put those in the box real quick. We'll stay on for another minute or two. But otherwise, have a good Friday off. I'm assuming everybody has Friday off, and happy Easter.